Michael C. Bush.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk about something about the 8 factors, but also share some other stories that I think will be useful for you as we think about running our businesses and managing property. And I'm really honored to be here with EBRHA to speak with all of you. It's great that you can come and be a part of something where you've got an organization where people say these kinds of things about you. That it's a great organization, and these 2 people said, you know, they just feel lucky that they found EBRHA. So I know that it's adding some value, so I'm very happy to be a part of that. I'm going to talk about the property manager that I know really well, which is my father, and some of the things that he taught me. My father passed away about 25 years ago, was a property owner, which I'm going to tell you about here in Berkeley and in Oakland, and a builder himself. And I was really lucky to go to some great schools, go to a great business school, but all that I've learned about business, which I've been lucky enough to do all around the world, I learned from this man, not from business school. So I wanted to pass on some of those things, not from a position of arrogance, but they've been helpful for me. I hope they'll be helpful for you too. One of the things I thought about when preparing for today is how things change. And here's the Muhammad Ali quote talking about that. And what I like about it is he kind of talks about, we know what we know, but are we willing to learn new things, which involves letting go of things that we know. I have my point of view. This is what I believe is true. Well, can we suspend that and really learn new things? I think that's what's inspirational here. This is a saying, the more things change, the more things stay the same. And I thought about if my father was here today, what he would think about some of the topics today. How much has property management changed from the time that he did it to today? And I looked at the EBRHA workshops, and I saw one of them was the eviction process from start to finish. If my father was here, he'd want to give a lecture on that. He'd want to tell you how you do it, and that this is very important that you do it correctly. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Talk about non-payment of rent invoices. He would be amazed that people were still talking about these topics, that nobody had found a different way yet at this time. And then he loved talking about this, how to maintain your property without going broke. Because his belief was the way you maintain your property without going broke is you maintain it and you do it yourself. You don't pay people to do it. It was just his belief that he was able to do that. Increasing rents to fund improvements. I saw that as one of the EBRHA workshops. Now, my father's buried in Barnesville, Georgia. The earth just moved because there was nothing more that made him feel better than the 2 words, increase rents. It just made him feel good to hear those 2 words put next to each other. He was the type where I would say, hey, Dad, can I use the car tonight? I'm going to take Sheila to the movies. And he would be getting ready to say no. And I'd say, yeah, we're going to talk about increasing rents. Here you go, boy. You know, Cleo, give that boy some money. You know, it just makes him feel good, like it does most property managers. He would also feel good to see Marcus Supply is still in business, because we did a lot of our business with Marcus Supply and Marcus Hardware as we were building buildings. The more things change, the more things stay the same. Some things that are different. Attorneys. As I grew up managing properties with my father, building properties, we didn't use attorneys. Now, I'm sure they were around, but we didn't use them, probably because my father didn't want to pay for it. But also, there weren't a lot of attorneys that had focused themselves on the business of property management. Now there's a list of them. He would be shocked to know that one of the law firms is called the Evictors. You know, that's something you could actually say today, which I saw. This is kind of the mood we got in when it was time to evict someone. It was serious, and there was nobody to call. We did it. There was nobody to hand it off to. Also, insurance services. I just kind of looked through the sponsors of today, and here's a couple of names that I saw. A company called Stay Liquid. My dad would say, what does that mean? What does Stay Liquid mean? And I would say, well, Dad, if he was here, I would say, that means you gotta have cash. Gotta have your hands on cash. He would go, oh, I like Staying Liquid then. He would immediately like it. And another one, PFN Insurance Services, that's here. That helps small business people find better ways, more cost-effective ways to do insurance. I also saw there's a business here called Innovative Laundry Systems. I'd really like to know what they do, compared to the things that we did. Because for us, a lot of times it would be a call at 10 at night where somebody broke into the laundry room with a hammer, knocked the little thing off the top of the washing machines to get the quarters that were inside. Now I know there's tokens now and there's electronic devices. For us, it was about a busted window or busted door and somebody smashing the washing machine. And I would say to my dad, you know, Dad, because finally we had to get rid of it. We had to get rid of the laundry services. And I would say, Dad, that's a lot of money we're not making. And he would say, I don't have the washing machines there to make that money a quarter at a time. I have them there so people can wash their clothes. Because just like you, people don't want to go someplace else. They want to do it here. So he was coming from a place not about making money a quarter at a time, but actually thinking about the tenants that were living there. I also saw there's a company here called Golden Gate Locksmith. We didn't know anything about that. When it was time for us to change a lock, we did it. And normally it looked like this. It'll be late at night with a flashlight. One of the tenants would call us and say, they just left apartment B, and we'd go. Because that was our time, our little window in time. Because when you have a problem tenant, the other tenants don't want them there either, actually. But that's the way that it got done. We didn't have somebody to call. Also, there's, of course, Sue Anthony is going to talk after I speak today on how to stage your property, how to make it more attractive. My dad would be very curious about what that is. Because for him, staging a property was the floors were clean, the water worked, there was hot water, the refrigerator worked, the windows were clean. That's staged. That's it. You don't need to put anything else in it. One of the things that, for all of us, for everybody here, just like my father, we get into business, we don't know why, but there's some goals that we have, some things that we're hoping for. Some people call it a vision, something we're trying to accomplish, maybe for ourselves or for our families. And sometimes you're not really clear on it, but it's driving you to make a series of decisions. For any business, it's helpful if you know what your vision is. If you know the things that you're trying to accomplish, you measure them, and you know what your values are. Your own beliefs. Ours are different. There's none that are right or wrong. You just need to be clear on what yours are. There are certain things in business you're willing to do, and there are certain things in business you're not willing to do. That's because of your values, because of who you are and who you believe in. So, in my experience, we kind of start this journey for some reason. Maybe to take care of our families. There's something that we want to accomplish in our lifetimes. And we're thinking property management might help us get there. There's a bunch of decisions we have to make. Do I buy that building? Should I buy that building? Should I raise the rents? We're making those decisions all to try and make some vision come true. To achieve something for ourselves and for our families and our communities. And then we have values, which is like the navigation system. It lets us know what we're willing to do and what we're not willing to do. So, for example, for my father, if there was somebody who was behind in their rent, maybe several months behind in their rent, happened a lot, but that person was working hard and keeping their place clean, they were not getting evicted. It just wasn't going to happen. But if you were trashing the place, or what he called lazy, and you were a month behind, he was going to be applying the heat. Because he was applying his own values on what he thought would be a good situation in terms of helping people and helping his properties. So how did this guy achieve his vision? This is a shot of my dad, 1961, 62, 41 or 42 years old, in Barnesville, Georgia, on the farm that he was raised on, his father was raised on, and his father's father was a slave on. His father was a sharecropper. That's me. At 2 years old, as I tell my sons who say, Dad, you make us work too hard, I say, look, I was working at 2 years old, so I don't want to hear about it. Okay, I'm glad I have the video footage, because I can tell stories of my kids about how hard I worked and actually show them that I was doing it. So, this is a guy born in Barnesville, Georgia, far away from here, who decided he wanted something more. He didn't know exactly what it was, but he got on a train and came to Oakland. This is just an American story. It's not unique to my family. Of somebody wanting something better for themselves. And they don't know how they're going to do it, but they take the risk to do it. Just like many of you did. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to buy the building and give it a try. I'm going to take that risk because I think something good will happen if I do it. He worked in the shipyards in Richmond and in Oakland, securing loads during the wartime, which is what brought a lot of people that look like him to California. Interesting shot here, where we look at 6 people working, 4 of them were women. You know, there was later something called the Women's Liberation Movement, where women were saying, we want to do the same jobs as men. My mother used to say, we've been doing the same jobs as men. And we got equal pay, not much. But that was the fact of the matter. This is where my dad worked. And a little bit later, he met my mother in South Berkeley in a boarding home. And my mother was 16, he was 29, and they got married in a quiet ceremony because they couldn't tell people because she was 16. Later, they got married publicly when she became 18. So when he left to go get married in Reno, came back to his job, he went to the job site, got his tools, and they said, BT, we got to talk to you. And he goes, about what? And they go, you don't have a job anymore. So what happened was, right before he left to get married, there was a young kid who joined the work crew, and they asked my dad to train him. And my dad remembered that the guy had a drinking problem, but he trained him anyway. My dad left to get married, came back, and they gave that young guy the job. Now, we know why that happened. It happened. So it's the way that it was. Did my dad stop and start complaining? No, that's not what he did. Okay, he took that bad situation, just like all of us do, and found a way to move forward. Now, my dad didn't speak eloquently like Martin Luther King. He would say things like, you know what I learned from that, Mike? Always have more than one paycheck. That's what he learned, which is what property management was about for him. He was a builder, but property management was a way for him to have more than one paycheck. So he started BT Bush Construction, first African-American owned general contracting firm in Berkeley. Got started, some of you know it says Berkeley 3, because there were no zip codes then. The phone number 845, it was actually TH5, Thornwall 5. So you have to be here and know something about this place, this town, to know what that means. My dad needed a truck to get started because he was a builder. Went to the bank, borrowed money for the truck, got the truck, got it home. He didn't have a car. He drove around in this. And people would tease him because he drove my mother around on dates, etc., in this truck. My dad saw nothing wrong. Well, what's wrong with that? And for his entire life, he thought there was nothing wrong with that. This is the kind of guy he was. Well, after about 2 weeks, the bank called him and said, we need your full payment on the loan. They called the loan. And he said, what? He goes, we're calling the loan. He said, calling the loan? What does that mean? And they said, we need the money now. So my dad goes to the bank. The guy says, well, I think I can help you out. You bring me $15 in a brown bag every week, and everything will work out okay. So my dad did that. What else was he supposed to do? Got to think about what time it was. But that's what he did. He kept moving forward. What did he learn from that? Beware of debt. That's what he learned. So for me, at age 5, 6, 7, I was hearing things like, can't trust the bank, Mike. Now, today, when I walk in the bank, I'm kind of nervous as a result of that. And I used to go in the bank and say, can I see my money? And they'd be like, you can't see your money. How come I can't see my money? I want to see my money. Well, the money's not really here. What? I'm still twisted, okay, as a result of this, because these things get etched in your brain. But if you know how my father learned this lesson, you know why he wanted to pass it on. This country would be very different right now if people were more beware of debt. So this is us. That's me in the middle, my brother and my sister. My mother and father kept going, kept moving forward to pursue their vision, which was this. If you talk to my dad, there were only 2 things he wanted to do. Send his kids to college and retire and take care of he and my mother. That's it. He wasn't, I want to have diversified properties and diversified holdings. That's not what he wanted. I want this and that and a summer home. He didn't want that. I want to go on vacation. He didn't take vacation. He wanted these 2 things. These are the 2 things that drove him. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm saying he was very clear on why he was doing everything that he was doing. Ended up sending my sister to the University of Portland, where she became a nurse that did critical care deliveries. Literally, has gotten awards and acclaim for saving hundreds of lives. That's due to my father, due to my mother. Sent my brother to Yale University, where he got an engineering and a medical school degree, went on to become a professor at Harvard. He's retired now. And now my brother delivers healthcare door to door, as he calls it, Marcus Welby style. He carries a black bag and goes to people's homes, delivers healthcare, writes the chart out by hand for free. That's what he does. So, an extension of my father's values and what he believed in, his vision actually came true. How did it happen? This is the first property my father owned, 1720 Stewart Street. I remember it well, 2 blocks down from my house. At the time, it was a 1-story, 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. That was the first property that he bought. He sold it to a guy in 1970 who then raised it and put a unit underneath it, and he sold it to send my brother to Yale. So already, this property management thing began to pay off so that he could do that. He next bought another property. This was his second one. We call it the big house, because it was bigger than that other house. It's 1726. Now, in the back of this unit is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath unit that my dad built, because he said, if you can stand on it, you can build on it. So he was always looking to build on whatever he could. So this is still there. And in the middle was something that we call the middle house, because it was in between the big house and the little house. And in that house was my dad's roofer, who liked to do 2 things, roof and drink whiskey. And that's a tough combination. So as a result, he was behind in his rent all the time, roofing to kind of work. It was kind of like sharecropping, really. But that's just the way it went. Guy had a big family, and it's just the way that it was. It was a mess. Well, one day, I hear these sirens, and fire trucks are going down the street, and everybody's running. People knock on the door. Mr. Bush, your house is on fire. We come out, and we run, all of us, my mother, me, my brother, sister, neighbors, one who's here, all run down to this house that's on fire. And this was the result. Burnt to the ground. So, I see this. I'm probably 6. I'm a mess. I don't know what's happened. And I'm crying uncontrollably. So finally, my mother can't console me, which meant it must have been a real problem, because she was everything. My dad came to console me, and he said, boy, what's wrong? He never called me Michael, it was boy. He said, boy, what's wrong? I said, Daddy, somebody burned your house down. And I was just a mess. You know, you're crying so much you can't even breathe? Like that, that's the way that I was. This is when I learned life was strange. Because my dad said, boy, you're not too smart. But let me tell you something. One day you'll understand it. This is the happiest day of my life. He said, there's this thing called insurance, and I'll tell you about it later. I remember it just like I was there, because I went, huh? I mean, this was my first time. Life is strange. Okay, well, what happened was, number one, my dad was a builder, which meant, you know, when you finish a job, people don't pay you what they owe you. They always try and get you on that last job. So he was in a tight situation. He was in a cash-strapped situation. And this family hadn't paid him rent for a couple of years. So it kind of took care of something else. All right? And then later, he explained to me about this thing called insurance. Okay? And how you can be in a tight situation for cash, and you got to have yourself covered. Which leads us to our lesson. Usually in the 8 factors, we talk about cash, we talk about income statements, we talk about cash flow planning. All these things, my father never used those words. Income statement, cash flow planning. He said things like this. Mike, it's not how much you make, it's how much you save. He didn't care. Dad, I'm making X amount. It doesn't matter how much you make, it's how much you save. Over, just like a broken record, my dad loved that song. Okay, we just say it over and over again. This is a house that's on Craigmont in Berkeley, the last house my father built. And I was in college at the time, and so right before going to college, we were getting this thing underway. Actually, we were finishing. And I took a picture of it because I just did this last week. The lot is very steep, and it's set back where that upper story is probably 80 feet off the street. So if you know anything about building, you know what I'm talking about. And there's some stairs next to the property that you can walk up to get into the top part of the property. But when we were building this home, the neighbors complained, and it's Berkeley, so we couldn't use that to take materials up and down. And if you know anything about building, you know what it's like to walk on those 2x12s, on a 2x12, carrying a 2x12, looking out at the San Francisco Bay with a fear of heights. It feels like you're on the bridge. It's horrifying. I know. And I would be shaking, and my dad would say, "You're shaking so much, boy, the house is going to collapse." Okay, but that's the way it was. And that's what we did, and that's the way that we built. We carried every material by hand, got cement up there in wheelbarrows, walking up sheets of plywood. Now, my brother goes to college, which to me meant he escaped. And he comes back, and he's telling my dad at the dinner table, "Dad," because he's highly educated now, he says, "Dad, they have these forklifts that will lift materials like a couple of stories high." My dad goes, "Oh, really?" And he goes, "Yeah, and they have these cement pucks, so we don't have to carry cement in buckets." And so my dad goes, "Oh, really?" And so my brother is so excited, and I'm so excited. And my father goes, "I know that. They've had those things." He said, "That's why I had you." There was nothing my father loved more than free labor. It made his day. He used to say, "One day I'm gonna make 100% profit, it's just all the labor has to be free." That was like part of his vision, and we were part of that program. The other thing my dad said is, I remember my brother graduating from medical school, started making some money, and he got a financial planner. And he called my dad and told him, "Dad, I got a financial planner." My dad said, "Oh, what?" He said, "A financial planner is a person who helps you know what to do with your money." My dad hung up the phone and turned to me and said, "I paid all this money for this boy to go to school, and he's gonna pay somebody else to tell him what to do with his money?" Now, I know we all have opinions on this, but this was my dad's opinion, okay? And he just said to me right then, he said, "Boy, nobody will manage your money like you should manage it, ever. And if you're ever stupid enough to have somebody else manage your money, you better watch it like a hawk. You better watch it like a hawk." Now, I hope I didn't offend anybody, but there's a lesson in it. There's a lesson in it. This was an ad from the United Eagle College Fund during this time with the slogan, "A mind is a terrible thing to waste." I don't know if you remember it or not. Very successful campaign, raised tons of money for historically black colleges, hugely successful, and people got around this notion that, you know what, we believe that. We should be doing something for every mind that we can do. Well, I was kind of crazy growing up, and occasionally I would do things. I went through a lot of schools at elementary school, not because of academic superiority, but sometimes due to problems that I was causing along the way. And other things that young people do. Well, my dad, whenever this commercial would come on, they would say at the end, "A mind is a terrible thing to waste." My dad would turn to me and say, "Boy, your mind is just a terrible thing." And it was his loving way of saying, "You better straighten up. You better straighten up." He just had this way, and he was a very effective communicator. This was something else, which I heard Wayne talk about earlier, which is times are good, what do? You gotta put away some nuts for the winter. He would always talk about how smart the squirrel was. And for those of you in the property management, times are getting a little bit better. So my dad would say things like, "Don't go buy that new car, you don't need it. You put that money away. When times are good, that's when you tighten up. That's when you get tighter." These are the things that he would say. So what he did is turn this situation, he took those nuts and put them into this building, his first apartment building, which was also on Stewart Street in the lot next door. The other thing we talk about in the 8 factors is people, which is for all of us in business kind of the toughest part. It's actually the hardest part. You know, a lot of us, business would be easy if there were no people involved. Some days, business would be easy if there were no customers involved. It's just a problem when that's true. But the people issues between us is the most complex issue in doing business. My father would always say this, "If we don't do it, then who will?" And that was really his values. Talking about giving people an opportunity, believing about the best in people, when things are bad, make tough decisions very promptly. He would just have this notion. I shared this picture of this shovel because this is one of the best lessons that he taught me. We were standing right there, which is 1612 Parker Street, in that driveway, and I was in college, and he called me and said, Mike, you gotta come home today. I got something serious to talk to you about. So I'm thinking, oh, my mother's sick, whatever. I get home. And I go, Dad, what's up? And he goes, oh, we gotta go do some digging at the building. Oh, okay. So we go down to the building, there's a piece of dirt. My dad decides we're gonna take it out and build some new grass because he doesn't like the way that it looks. As we're standing there, about to get started, this guy comes by and he goes, hey, you need any help? And my dad goes, well, what do you want? He goes, well, I can help you dig this. My dad says, you know how to dig? And he goes, yeah, I know how to dig. And he goes, okay. He goes, well, go grab a shovel. The guy goes and he grabs this shovel. All right, now this ground is hard as cement. This is the shovel that he grabs. So we're standing there, and then the guy goes, you know, how much are you gonna pay me? My dad says, how much do you want? This is 20 bucks, and I'll dig all that dirt out. I'm happy as I can possibly be, because I don't have to do it. I love it. I'm like, thank you, God, finally. So the guy says, I'll do it for 20 bucks. My dad says, I'll give you 25. That's kind of the way my dad did it. Gotta have it done by 3 o'clock. The guy goes, can you give me something to get started? And my dad goes, what do you want? He goes, like 5 bucks. You know, to kind of get me started, to make sure I know. My dad goes, okay, gives him 5 bucks. We walk around the side of that building, come back to the front, and there's the shovel laying in the concrete in the driveway. Now my father's smiling and he looks at me and he goes, what just happened? I go, I don't know what just happened. He goes, I'll tell you what happened. That guy took the 5 bucks, which is what he wanted, and he left. He didn't know anything about digging, obviously, because he would have known you need a shovel that looks like that. You can't dig with a square point shovel. But the guy did that. My dad did the whole thing just to teach me a lesson. He knew from the beginning. And his lesson was, beware of paying people in advance. And he drove that in my brain. Do not pay people in advance. Now, if somebody needs something for materials, you go buy them the materials. Do not pay people in advance. So he put this in my brain. I go to Canada to build a wireless network in Canada for Ted Rogers. $50 million project. I go there, I don't know what I'm doing, my first time in Canada. I'm in a room full of Canadians and I'm not one of them. And I look different for all kinds of reasons, not just for being American. So I'm there and I'm laying out the project, okay, here's what we gotta do. We got 15 months to get it done, blah, blah, blah. And they go, okay, well we get 15% in advance here in Canada before we start our work. And I'm like, I wanna say I'm not Canadian, but I don't, because that would have been good. I just said, well, I'm not paying in advance. And they get pissed off. And so I'm like, okay, this is odd. I don't know what to do. I'm like, I'm just not paying in advance. Look, you do some work, you get paid. Do some work, you get paid. Do some work, you get paid. We're gonna set these milestones and I'm gonna pay you, and I'll pay you the day I get the invoice. But I'm not gonna pay you in advance. So they start gathering their stuff and leaving. One guy goes, what's in it for us? I said, look, if we get this whole network built across this great country on time by November 1st, I'll give everybody an additional 3% of whatever your contract value was, an additional 3%. He stands up, he goes, 7%. I say 4%. He says 5%. Got a deal, because that's exactly the number that I wanted. Okay? And he sits down. Other people are starting to leave, other people start sitting down. They all sat down, went for the deal. They got the project up, it was great for them, it was certainly great for me and my business. The only reason I knew to do that was this shovel story. It wasn't, because in business school, they don't talk to you about real life and common sense things. This is something you gotta learn from somebody who knows. A couple other things my dad taught me. Beware of 4/15, April 15. He said, Mike, when tax time comes, I was 12. He said, one day you're gonna run a business. Now that's a compliment from my father. About the best you're gonna get. Mike, one day you're gonna run a business. He said, beware of 4/15. You're gonna have people working for you and they're gonna get their tax bill. Funny thing's gonna happen. They're gonna want you to pay their taxes. And what he meant was all the invoices get increased a little bit. Because people know that they're gonna pay, not everybody, I'm not condemning everybody, but some people. Some people. So he said, always have all your invoicing done in March. Be real clear what you're going to pay people so that it doesn't go up. The other one is the last invoice, which some of you know this lesson. You're learning it or living it every day, which is just like when I did that work in Canada, finished the whole project, I didn't get the final invoice payment from Ted Rogers. He cut it. What could I do? I'm like 48 million in, 2 million left. He goes, I'll give you $1 million. Now I know $1 million's a lot of money. When it's you, it's really a lot of money. But because of my father, I had already planned that I wasn't going to get it. Already baked it in. It's in the profit margin, already collected. If I got it, it would be a cherry on top. But I was anticipating and planning. I wasn't going to string my family out or anything else by not getting it. Did business in Brazil. Same thing happened. Big project, build out the wireless network, last invoice, didn't get it. Everybody's crying, I wasn't. I already planned to not get it. Because I had learned it's just something that people do to one another sometimes. After you work your brains out and do everything you say you're going to do, they decide to cut you on the last invoice. They're not cutting you earlier, they're cutting you when the work is done. It happens. It's not something we want to do. Hopefully we don't do that to each other, but certainly experienced it. And this is the lesson of all that. People aren't always what they seem to be. And in the people business, we have to be aware of this. We can have some people who come to us and want to rent our apartment, and they look like perfect gentlemen. As soon as, notice the door is closed, as soon as they get inside, look at them. Okay, look at what happens. What my father would say is, he made sure that I knew, look, there are great tenants, and there are not so great tenants. There are great plumbers, and not so great plumbers. There are great builders, and not so great builders. There are great appliance people, and not so great appliance people. There are great attorneys, and not so great attorneys. Tenants weren't any different from anybody else. There are great ones and not so great ones. There aren't classes, they're all people. And to see them that way. He also talked to me about paying small businesses on time, which was interesting because he was a small business, but he didn't see himself that way. He didn't see himself that way at all. He would talk about the people he did business with, the plumbers, the tradespeople, etc., and say, you gotta pay them on time, Mike. You gotta pay them on time. You gotta pay them on time. If you don't, they're gonna have to borrow money, and it's almost impossible to borrow money. Now, he was telling me this in the 70s. Just think if he had seen 2007, 2008. Okay, but he was giving me this lesson. He would also say, pay him enough. And don't just, because you get a good deal, you know you're squeezing somebody, don't do it. Don't do it. He would say, you can't make all the money, Mike. You can't make all the money. And I must have been behaving in a way that made it look like I was trying to. But he delivered the message, you can't make all the money. He would say, when you're sitting across the table from somebody, no, they got a family too. They got dreams and visions too. You can't make yours at the expense of theirs. So you can't make all the money. It's just a value that he pushed through. And he talks about building a team. So the service businesses, we know we gotta deliver, we gotta be consistent. That's the way to build trust. When you break trust, you can't rebuild it. It's very difficult to do. Your word has to be your bond. Culture, which is kind of the feeling to what it feels like to work with me, what it feels like to work with you. What are we trying to create here? Some people think these things aren't important. I think these things are important. For us, it's factor 5 of the 8 factors. My dad thought it was important. He thought promptness was important. And he would say, that shows you know it's their home. And here's what would happen. Be sitting in the back of our house, it'd be 8:30 at night, the phone would ring. My father would be dead asleep. He slept in this lounge chair. He'd come home, take a shower, get dressed, sit in that chair and go to sleep. That's just what he did every day because he was tired from what he had done all day. Phone would ring, and we knew when that phone rang, it was probably a tenant. And my mother would say, Bush, and my dad would start cussing. He would get up, his eyes would be bloodshot. I can see him now, because he was beat. And he would walk to the phone, cussing, and say, hello? That's what he would do. Uh-huh. Okay. All right. And hang up. Boy, we gotta go. And we'd go down to the apartment, and usually it was a water heater that we had to swap out. And I'd be like, Dad, could we do this on Saturday? Can't we? And he'd say, boy, don't you like hot water in the morning? They do too. So that got etched in my brain about speed and being prompt and letting people know that it was their home and you knew it. Because my father did that, the roofers acted different, the painters acted different, the appliance people acted different, everybody acted different because they knew my father's attitude about things like this. So by his actions, he shaped the culture of the whole team. Be loyal to suppliers and subcontractors, build a team. My dad would barbecue, and payday was Friday. Every Friday people would come. They'd be barbecuing, cooking, Slits beer everywhere. Everybody was in a good mood. I don't know if it was the Slits beer or the payday or the connection of the two. But that's just the way he did it. He invited everybody who was involved. So everybody knew everybody. And it built a team. It built a team that worked. So when he needed something, people were there for him. He was loyal to them. They were loyal to him too, because he knew that people knew that he cared. Leadership, which is about you. Some of you may say, well, I'm not really a leader, or you might say, I am a leader. Well, we're all leaders. We all affect people around us. We're all trying to get things done. We're all running businesses. My suggestion is to be hands-on. If you want to run a business just from a spreadsheet or something like that, the problem is people can blow up any spreadsheet. Deals always look good on paper, but what's really happening? This stuff is just unreliable. You can believe it if you want, but it's just kind of a dream, normally a fantasy, accompanied by color printers and nice graphics telling you the world's fantastic, you're going to make money forever. Reality is different. The only way to know reality is to be hands-on. So he would always say, you got to go to the buildings, Mike. You got to walk the buildings, Mike. People got to see you, Mike. You got to go see the appliance people. You got to go say hello to them. You've got to move your feet and get into the business. You can't do it sitting in a room with computer screens. He didn't say that because there weren't any computer screens, but that's what he would have said. So how do we become better managers or leaders? We have to learn. We have to unlearn. All of you are here today doing that. You're here taking time out of your Saturday morning to learn, to grow, to be better. That's the start. That's the beginning. That's how it happens. Congratulations on being here today. Taking the time out so you can learn how to do what you're trying to do better in an effort to help your vision come true. Just want to remind you of a few things that my father passed on. You're supposed to tell him what you're going to tell him what you told him, and then tell him again. These are just some reminders. If you'd like a copy of this presentation, come by and see us at booth 129. We'll email it to you if that's helpful for you. You want to map out this plan for you. That was my dad's. It's only your plan that matters. And in ending, I just want to look to a vision that's positive and makes you feel good. For some people, this makes people feel good. A bed of roses. Stop and smell the roses. I was in Pasadena last week, and I was walking down the street, and I stopped and smelled the rose, because I realized I had never done that. You know, I was like, they say stop and smell the roses. It smelled good. And it was bizarre. When I leaned over to smell it, I forgot about a whole lot of things. A whole lot of things. And I looked at the rose thing, and I was like, all the roses I've walked past, and I never stopped to do this. Sometimes trying to rush to get to some spreadsheet. Okay? For some of us, this works. A serene vision. Looking at the water. It's calming. It makes us feel good. It's invigorating. For some of us, it's a sunset or a sunrise. Just gives us a good feeling, a new beginning, a day that's closing. We all have a vision, something that makes us feel good. For my dad, those didn't work. This is what worked. Looking at a property. Because he saw his vision coming true through this, not those other things. Thank you very much.